Hello there beautiful humans, my name is RidersDX. Welcome to my channel, where today we're gonna clown a little bit more because we're gonna talk about the possibilities of Sonic Heroes making a comeback using evidence that's really not like anything significant, to be honest, but it's a nice start nonetheless, and there is a little bit of a logic to it that helps it make a little sense. So there's some evidence that I'm gonna bring up that's actually been going around Twitter in particular. So this is evidence that if you've been on Sonic Twitter, then you're probably well aware of, but then there's also like a connection that I want to make at the later half of this video that I haven't seen anyone make yet, that I think makes perfect sense in my head and could very well continue to point to like some kind of Sonic Heroes revival. And so let's go ahead and just kind of dive into this stuff. So the thing that I wanted to bring up at first that's gone like semi-viral on Twitter is this tweet from like DT Bros, where they basically screen capped this image from, I think, the Tails Tube like stream that happened like a couple weeks or so ago. And so this came off of the heels of the recent announcement that Sega is going to be making an appearance at Gamescom. And so DT Bros put this over here and basically showed off this little screen cap where you see this distorted image in the Tails Tube stream, and it's actually the Sonic Heroes like cutscene. I think it's the last scene in Team Sonic's story in particular, where they're on the egg carrier, or was it the egg fleet? I'm sorry. I mean, Eggman should just call everything the same thing at this point, because it's honestly just like reiterations of the same thing. But anyway, you can clearly see that this is like a distorted image of that cutscene, and it would not be a stretch for the team to leave like Easter eggs like this throughout their streams to kind of like point towards a future project. And of course, hot off the heels of the recent announcement, or at least the recent confirmation from the Sega president that they are looking to reboots and remakes, it is a possibility that Sonic Heroes could come back. I mean, it doesn't really seem like the most obvious choice because you have the adventure games right there, but if you think about it, Sonic Heroes is technically the best-selling 3D Sonic game before Sonic Frontiers eventually takes it over. So if they look at it from strictly numbers perspective, then it makes sense why they would go for Sonic Heroes at some point, if not in the immediate future. But the thing that I want to bring up that I haven't seen really brought up anywhere else, unless I just live under a rock, if y'all remember, a few weeks ago, Sega filed its trademark for something called Sonic and Friends, as I'm showing here being reported by Sonic Stadium. And so it's a pretty generic trademark. It's listed under a bunch of categories like machines and appliances, toys, clothing, paper, and also education and entertainment. But apparently Frontiers' trademark was also categorized under similar things, and so that does kind of give a little legitimacy that there's something coming up with this thing. ROM cartridges and optical disc in particular are mentioned, which point directly to a game title. And so we do know that there's some kind of game most likely coming on in the future that's related to the code name Sonic and Friends. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, Sonic and Friends? Sonic Heroes? Like, it makes too much sense, to be honest. Like, Sonic and Friends points to something that's not just a Sonic solo adventure, but it's going to involve a bunch of different Sonic characters. And I guess you could argue that it could also be pointing to like a racing game, or like a party game, or some sort of like spin-off like that. But I don't know. Sonic and Friends, I feel like Sonic and Friends could also very well point to some kind of Sonic Heroes project coming out. And I just think that that's a very convenient connection to make over here, especially with this like little Easter egg they left in the Tails Tube stream. And so based off of that, I can kind of see why people are running with it and saying that like Sonic Heroes is definitely going to come back. Whether or not it's actually realistic for Sonic Heroes to come back in this format, I'm really not sure, to be honest. Like, okay, listen here. I'm a huge Sonic Heroes fan. You know, I will defend this game until I die. It was my very first Sonic game, and it is the Sonic game that introduced me to this franchise, and it turned me from like a video game fan to a video game stan. So I went from just like liking video games and playing them whenever I wanted to literally dedicating most of my days looking up and talking about video games with other people. Like, it's the reason I got into like Sonic message boards, and it's the reason I eventually got into like making YouTube videos about Sonic games and such. It literally is the game that was like the benchmark for me to getting into this world. And so I am one of the biggest proponents for Sonic Heroes to come back. Don't get me wrong. If they ever announce an actual Sonic Heroes remaster or even a Sonic Heroes sequel, I will die of happiness. I'm not even like sugarcoating that. That is literally what will happen. But I also see from like a logical standpoint that like Sonic Heroes just seems like a very strange direction to travel in after Sonic Frontiers in particular. It honestly just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so I can very well imagine it being some kind of like remaster at best. If they really wanted to like do something with Sonic Heroes, then like remastering it and just making it a little bit like nicer here and there, releasing it on modern platformers is something that I can envision them doing, because that wouldn't take too much effort, honestly, and perhaps it's gonna go towards some kind of strategy of incorporating Sonic's friends a little bit more in the franchise. Because if there's one thing you gotta admit about the Sonic franchise, is that there's a lot of fanfare for all Sonic characters in this franchise. And I feel like the fact that Sonic has so many characters has contributed to how like dedicated this fan base is. Because, you know, if you just had like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy and that was it, then it's like, okay, great, everyone just has like these 4 characters to choose from. But because Sonic has so many different characters in his cast, you have all these like different like subsections of the fan base dedicated to all these different characters, and I really feel like that's contributed to making Sonic such a cult favorite, you know, having all these different characters that people can like kind of put their stand card for. And so I wonder if like Sega is finally realizing that that's like a big like advantage to this franchise, you know, by allowing like Ian Flynn to come on and like make more of these like stories in particular involving all the Sonic characters and really like expanding on the lore. I'm really starting to think that like they're understanding that Sonic has his appeal, and it can really be a big profit revenue in particular, you know, drawing a bone to all these different subsections of the fan base and like releasing all these merch, all these like comic books or stuff dedicated to all these different characters. And you know, having a video game that focuses on all of Sonic's friends in particular can only increase that adoration for all these different subsets of the Sonic franchise. And so from that perspective, I can kind of see Sonic Heroes as like a move that makes sense. And so I think it's much more likely for it to be a Sonic Heroes remaster rather than like a sequel. Or you know what, it could be an evolution of Sonic Heroes. They might take the basic idea of playing multiple characters at the same time and sort of just like change that and make that into something a little bit different. Maybe a Sonic Frontiers like game, but you have multiple characters being played on screen at the same time, you know, having like co-op or something like that. I don't know. All I know is that like something with Sonic and his friends is coming out in the near future, and Sonic Heroes just seems like one of those like very likable scenarios, but I don't know how realistic it is personally. So that's my ultimate thought on it. I would love it. I would love Sonic Heroes to come back, but I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for this franchise at this point. I think it makes a lot more sense to go for like an adventure remake, as I've discussed in my previous video, just because of all the things that are lining up, like the Sonic movie for instance. But I mean, you never know. Sega has been known to throw some wild cards out there. I mean, these are the same people that greenlit Shadow the Hedgehog, so it honestly is anyone's guess as to what's coming next. All I know is that they're leaving Sonic Heroes Easter eggs everywhere, and Sonic and Friends is not too far off from an actual Sonic Heroes project. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think this points like a Sonic Heroes remake or a revival or a remaster or whatever you want to call it? Or do you think this is completely BS in terms of like the theory and that we're just wasting our time over here? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and also let me know what you think Sonic and Friends will end up being. Like, this is just something that I really want to make a video about at some point, but I just never got to it. So let's also just kind of take this some time to think about what Sonic and Friends actually could be all about. You know, a racing game and a party game actually don't sound like they'd be bad ideas either. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, because as soon as we get any news as to what any of this is, then I'll be sure to let you know right here on this channel. But alright y'all, thank you so much. This is Riders, riding out.